Hello, and welcome to the 2017 CFO Virtual Event, Exploring the Modern CFO-CIO Partnership. My name is Jess Baza with Argyle Executive Forum, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have a few administrative details to share with you, and then I'll turn things over to our speakers. First, we would like to thank Accenture and Workday for their partnership with today's event. They've been wonderful thought leadership partners to Argyle and are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. So thank you again to Accenture and to Workday. We welcome you to stay connected during today's event. You can follow us on Twitter at Argyle Exec Forum and be sure to join our LinkedIn group. If you'd like to tweet on today's virtual event, please tag your posts with hashtag ArgyleCFO. We are very proud and protective of our high standards in ensuring the neutrality and value of our content. We ask for your support in working diligently with us to ensure you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints on each of the issues covered. We work closely with all speakers, members, and partners to ensure Argyle's content neutrality guidelines, and we appreciate everyone's respect for our policy. We will send a brief feedback survey to you following the event, and we'd greatly appreciate your feedback as it helps us to make sure we are always improving your experience. If you have any immediate feedback, please don't hesitate to reach us at feedback@argyleforum.com. We have included a sampling of some upcoming CFO leadership forums that may be of interest to you. As you can see, we're going to be in LA, Atlanta, Dallas, New York, and Chicago, and hope you'll be able to join us at an upcoming meeting. A quick note to please submit any and all questions that come up during today's event into the Q&A section of the interface. Following the panel discussion, we have set aside some time for our speakers to weigh in on these questions. Now, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Chris Johnston, Managing Director, Finance and Risk Business Services with Accenture. We are pleased to have Chris with us to deliver some opening remarks and to moderate today's panel discussion. Welcome, Chris. Over to you.
Great. Thanks, Jess, and thanks to Argyle and in advance, thanks to our panelists for today's discussion. Welcome to all of you that are participating virtually. I hope you're having a good start to your Mondays at this point. I will just give you a quick intro and get through some introductory perspectives from an Accenture point of view on how CFO roles are very actively evolving in this kind of current digital environment that we're in. And then, as Jess said, we'll get into a panel discussion and then have some time at the end for your Q&A as well. So what I'll start out with real quickly, just in terms of my background. I work primarily with CFOs and CIOs and their collective teams at Accenture clients in order to help them drive any flavor of transformation that they may be facing. So the reason I say that is because I've had perspective over the last 25 plus years of doing that and seen a lot of different technology evolutions and different waves and areas for improvement on finance and other aspects of businesses. And I think certainly my career, this is probably one of the most active and rapidly changing environments that I've seen. So it's an exciting time to be a finance practitioner and working within your businesses. I know we've got folks on the call from a wide variety of industries. So certainly I'm sure you're seeing lots of change in your organizations as well. So what I wanted to do is just share a little bit of perspective, as I said, around some research that we've done recently, and hopefully you'll find it a bit interesting and maybe as a conversation starter as we get into the panel. So first and foremost, one thing to consider is finance has an increasingly proximate and collaborative relationship with, I'll say, digital and or technology. So we can use the phrase BFF if that's comfortable to you and you have children or you use that in your own social worlds. We use other words sometimes as well that are maybe more traditional around collaborator or business partner, or maybe to be somewhat more provocative, a word like evangelist we've kind of put out there. But the punchline is that digital and finance, or technology and finance in the context of digital, I should say, are really are blending and merging. And I think this is happening a couple different ways. One of them is in the context of the overall business environment. So finance and the overall advisory and operational role that finance provides is obviously quite close to new business initiatives, whether it's distribution channel changes, whether it's new products that are more fueled by digital technologies or interactions. And so finance is increasingly close to helping launch and deploy and oversee and manage those aspects of business change, which is fantastic and hopefully exciting for you and your finance teams. And then certainly there's the opportunity for finance as a capability and an entity in and of itself to be leveraging digital as well. So some of the stats on the page here, just as a point of reference, are really about how finance organizations and CFOs are seeing digital on the rise within their groups. And I will tell you that in the last couple of years that we've kind of done some of this polling and research, these numbers have already jumped dramatically. And the conclusion, as opposed to getting caught in the specifics of whether it's 20% or 30% or when will it reach 50% and the tipping point, is I think that there's a lot going on. And this was a pretty wait and see kind of view 2 years ago. It's well past wait and see, and there's a lot happening, and it's a good time to make sure that you're sparking further collaboration. So just out of curiosity, I guess, Jess, we've got this polling question if you want to give the quick instruction for the group on how to walk through this.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris. This is our first polling question. The first question is, have you increased collaboration with your CIO's office within the last year? The options are yes, slightly, yes, significantly, no, our level of collaboration has held steady, or no, we don't collaborate much at all. Please take a few moments to select your answer. We'll leave this question up for a few more seconds to allow the remainder of the attendees to answer. And once we shut this question down, we'll share the results and have Chris make a few comments before moving on. So please go ahead and make your final selection here. And Chris, here are the results. Back over to you.
All right. Well, that was quick. I was going to start and request some Jeopardy music, but we didn't even need it. So that's interesting. So it looks like a couple people are holding out without much collaboration, but a lot are leaning in pretty substantially, or perhaps we're maybe already collaborating at a satisfactory level. So I guess I hope this is something, if you haven't already seen it increase or are actively increasing it, or perhaps it's already at a level that you're comfortable with, I would just encourage you to consider looking for ways to expand and challenge that as you think about your upcoming plans and your horizon. So, and the reason why I say that is really a good segue into the next page, and it's because it matters. So without being too altruistic about it, I think the organizations that we've worked with and certainly have interviewed as part of some of this research, we're pretty clear about seeing, in this case, the stat is a higher percentage of ROI than they had expected. And without getting into the mechanics of how you all think about measuring ROI and all that kind of math, if you will, I think the punchline is one of perhaps pleasant surprise in that, if there was apprehension on the historical horizon, there is optimism on the future horizon, and or even confidence, optimism or confidence on what this path can be. So not everybody's spending the same. Not everybody probably has the same expectation of what those benefits can be. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But I think I would encourage you to be thinking about having some sort of tangible value that you can capture. And again, you can consider multiple facets of that within your business, and then certainly directly within your finance function as well. There's another statistic that's not within the slides today, but it was interesting to me from last year, where we had a view of the way people were perceiving digital, and this is not just finance. This was a broader view of overall kind of digital workforce dynamics. And there were very much two camps. One of them was a camp of, I hope this works, but I'm not sure yet, and if it does, I don't know what we'll get out of it. And then the other was, I know it's going to work, and I'm excited about it, but I'm not sure if I see it as a cost reduction move or as a bigger value lever. So I think, again, those that have been most excited and most successful with their initiatives have taken the let's make it work, kind of lean toward it perspective, and have also stretched beyond cost reduction as a value lever to consider. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. So again, however you may measure ROI, I think you can also expect to consider some broader benefits, perhaps more qualitative, depending on how you think about overall benefits within your organization. So, and those can number quite broadly across risk mitigation and how you are sharing and controlling distribution of information within finance. One of the nice, I would say, tangible benefits of those organizations that have taken steps to move to the cloud is there is typically some inherent simplification that takes place with that type of move. Often that brings with it some data-related work or data improvement, sourcing, attribution of data, which obviously can get you to better reporting and better forecasting. And then really the holy grail, in my opinion, and for most of the clients that I interact with, is that it's all about better insights. So if you can translate and kind of flip your teams into an insight generation mechanism as opposed to a transactional kind of operation, then I think you find, in many cases, a more fulfilled workforce, a more engaged set of business partners in terms of the value that finance is bringing, and hopefully more rapid, accelerated, kind of higher velocity decision making as well. So, a couple things to think about as you think about how do I begin to make this change. And everybody thinks certainly and is aware that there's a lot around technology, but I think we use the term operating model sometimes. That is in an umbrella sense going to include and cover across technology and processes and all of the people dimensions. But I would say really the most important combination is the intersection of the technology change and how that impacts your finance workforce. Because if you've already begun on this journey, you'll know that it's a material impact to how people do their work. And it's not just about automation. It's also about thinking differently, interacting with business folks differently, changing some of your day-to-day habits for sure. Hopefully finding yourself with more time on your hands to contemplate and answer, more difficult and kind of pressing questions about where the business is going. So there's some pretty interesting dynamics at work there. And again, I would encourage you to think as broadly as you're able around how you leverage digital as a mechanism to really improve your finance function and not just narrow that or keep that constrained to technology. So another chance for a quick pause and a polling question related to progress here. Jess, you want to orchestrate this one real quick?
Excellent. Thanks so much, Chris. Our second question is, how far along do you feel your finance team is in its digital transformation? We'll ask you to please rate from 1 to 5. 1 is not very far. We have a lot of manual and paper-based processes. And number 5 is very far. We have implemented currently digital technologies that are running efficiently. So please take a few moments to select your answer. We'll leave this poll up for a few more seconds to allow the remainder of the attendees to answer. And like last time, once we shut this question down, we'll share the results and have Chris make a few comments. So please go ahead and make your final selection. And Chris, here are the results. Back over to you.
All right, so we have, it looks like, a lot of work in progress, which is exciting and probably consistent with some of the other statistics that we had shared thus far. So it's great to see people have begun, and I think that's encouraging. I'll take that as a sign of, at minimum, optimism that there are good things to come out of this change. And there are a few of you that are maybe still thinking about when you might get started, but hopefully based on your participation on this call, maybe we'll keep leaning that direction. So it is, the only other comment I'll make is some people think about this maybe having a very finite start and stop point, this type of journey or this type of, I've gone to the cloud or I've gone digital. I would encourage you to certainly have specific targets and milestones as you think about navigating your individual journeys with your organizations, but not over-focusing on, one type of tool to implement or any sort of kind of transactional or specific individual project, because I think in many cases it's a multi-year process with lots of steps in it. So anyway, good to see so many of you already along the way. I mentioned a moment ago when we think about digital transformation, and in particular with finance, this is probably true across organizations as well, but one of the key enablers beyond the technology relates to the talent. And for the last several years when we interview CFOs even outside the context of digital, one of the key things that I hear is they're always talking about continued focus on talent and talent expansion and where are the new skills coming from, how do they keep those skills fresh. And so just in terms of our research, both within our workforce groups as well as the research we've done with CFOs and finance teams, what I can tell you is the horizon of talent and skill sets is expanding, and maybe to some less traditional places. And this page, referencing data science and kind of the core mathematics and analytics curriculums, as well as sociology, is not to suggest that we're going to forget about accounting and finance and kind of the baseline skills, but because I think that should never happen. But pivoting to these new skill sets and integrating these within teams, I think is a really key thing to consider as you look to unlock value. And I don't know how many of you have already begun to adapt some new ways of thinking about how you interact with your stakeholders, but design thinking is out there as a way to imagine our interactions differently now. And I would say this whole notion of sociology, for folks that understand the interactions between individuals, is a really important tenet for that. And maybe you have access to that in other parts of your organization to help you kind of migrate and think differently about how you will be collaborating and working together. But if you don't, I would encourage you to think about bringing that directly into your finance teams as a real good kind of spark and enabler of how people can be thinking about changing their own roles and changing the way that you interact with your business partners. And hopefully the data science and the math and the analytics are obvious, but with the infusion of data and the information that is accessible, obviously there's an increasing focus to understand how do you make that into something useful, whether it's modeling or other types of quantitative analysis, which, again, to the extent that you haven't already made that pivot, I would encourage you to think about it. So just wrapping up, a couple of three things that I'd like you all to keep in mind as you continue and or start or complete, if that's possible, your digital journeys within your organizations. And again, this would apply both to your own teams in finance and as you interact and continue to support your broader business stakeholders. And to some degree, the polling question answered this a bit, but I would say many are still taking a cautious toe in the water on digital, and that's referred to here as digital light. I would say one thing to think about is pilots are very easy and popular to do, but if only done by themselves, are very rarely kind of satisfying or fulfilling. So if you've begun to dip your toe in, and that was the right way to get things started, then I commend you for that. But if you've sort of hesitated, then maybe just think carefully about how do you continue to challenge your team or your technology organization to help you press forward, because there are people out there that are doing that in a fairly radical and broad-based way, and I think you'll get some good value for it. Next is think beyond cost and productivity. We talked about this before. I think hopefully digital allows you to pivot how you spend your time in finance. There may be some savings that you choose to capture as it relates to kind of what your overall cost structure is, or you may choose to reinvest that into other more valuable functions within finance that you can partner with your business folks. So think beyond that, beyond just cost as a value lever for sure. And then finally, be prepared to make decisions differently. So this is a great place for CFOs to lead by example. Digital is a fairly radical impact if you can really embrace it and look at how you can be helping your own teams, and then again working with your business partners to generate new insights, tackle new and more difficult questions, and really take a view towards the future. There's a metaphor that a friend of mine introduced me to that was the fact that windshields are 150 times larger than rearview mirrors, and that's done for a reason. So without getting into the ergonomics of auto design, I think my wisdom for you there is encourage your teams to focus on the future and try to get more proactive about how you can be offering insights and making decisions differently. So. And there is some additional research if you're interested in more of this. We've used this word, digital apostles, to apply to CFOs to really kind of try to be provocative in helping finance functions think about how their worlds are changing. So feel free to take a look if that's interesting to you. And I guess without further ado, what we'd like to do is jump into some panel discussion. So I'll thank the panelists again in advance for the time that we'll spend here over the next few minutes. We've got a handful of questions that we're going to walk through, and I'll let each of them go through a quick introduction, and then we'll dive right in. So, John, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself first?
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. My name is John Hugo. I'm VP of Financial Products and Go-to-Market for Workday. I've been in this role about a year and a half. I have a traditional finance and accounting background, 25 years of auditing and controllership roles. The last 11 years, I was the SVP and corporate controller of Lifetime Fitness based in Minneapolis, about a 26,000 employee, $1.5 billion healthy way of life company. And we were an early adopter of Workday. We were customer number 12 back in 2008. So now I'm on the Workday side, and what I do, Chris, and the people listening is speak to a lot of CFOs and controllers and VP of Finance in my role. And it's really interesting, Chris, that a lot of the slides you've shown in my 18 months at Workday, I get a lot of that same feedback. I like your toe in the water digital light reference because that's kind of where we're at right now, but I think the ball's starting to roll pretty heavily here with the CFO group. Thanks.
Great, and welcome again. Marcella, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Yes, thank you, Argyle and Jeff, for having me here, and thank you, Chris, for referring to CFOs as new apostles. I really like that. I feel in my organization we have embraced digital change significantly, and I'm very excited to be here. My name is Marcela Martin. I am the CFO of National Geographic Partners. National Geographic Partners is a joint venture between the National Geographic Society and 21st Century Fox. I was born and raised in Argentina. I have, as well as John, a traditional accounting and finance degree, CPA, master's degree. And pretty much my whole life I have been involved in media. I started in Coopers & Lybrand, and then a little bit after that I moved into an entertainment company, European entertainment company, and then after that I've been working for Fox, and I've been in the organization for 18 years. I was previously the CFO for the international channels for both Fox and National Geographic, and about a year ago I decided to move to Washington to focus solely on National Geographic.
Fantastic, thank you. And Joe, you want to do a quick intro?
Sure, thank you. And thank you everyone for the opportunity to participate. I'm a little bit of a different background. My company, Tayo Yuden, makes electronic components. Our market, about 40-45% is in smartphone, and then we have products that are for the Internet of Things, and we're moving into automotive space. So tiny little components that are necessary for every circuit and generally focused on consumer electronic type products. This is a really great topic for us. We have worldwide production, and we're constantly thinking of ways to better process our data and make us stronger and more competitive. And you can imagine with in the smartphone market how quickly that moves with the next product coming online every 6 to 9 months and trying to supply to all the top manufacturers in that space. There's quite a bit of challenges, and I think that CFO along with the CIO have a key role in that. So this is very key and important to my group.
Great. Well, thanks, guys. And it's clear that Argyle's helped us assemble a great group of panelists with a lot of experience here in this space. So let's jump right into a handful of questions, guys. And we'll start with a relatively simple one and really just founded around this notion of CFO-CIO collaboration. So, how are you all collaborating across that boundary within your organizations? And if you've got some ideas for best practices on how you forge the partnership or how you maintain it, and then maybe if you've had some challenges or encountered or climbed over some barriers to developing that relationship, what were they and how are you working through those? Just feel free to respond maybe to any facets of that as we chat for a minute. And maybe John, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. So in my background, I think the CFO and the CIO, I would say, have always had a good relationship, but never to the point that I'm seeing right now. With the digital transformation and the rapidly changing technology, I think that relationship has really gotten significantly tighter. The CFO's always been risk averse, as you know. Debits on the left, credits on the right. That's how we do things. But I was at a CIO conference a few months ago, and almost all of the CIO attendees that were there had the same thought, and it was if I could just convince our CFO to transform and evolve technically. So I think the CIOs are there. They're seeing the future, and they're just trying to get the CFOs to buy into that. And obviously, we're seeing it from the statistic you've shown. So, whether it's cloud or mobile or other digital areas, I think the CFOs recently have seen the need to work more directly with their CIOs and develop more evolving technology roadmaps. It probably wasn't a roadmap 5 years or longer ago. I'm seeing, and this was true at Lifetime Fitness, we had a board and a CEO that was always challenging the CFO, my boss, and myself to keep ahead technically. So, as you read more and more and hear events just like the one we're hosting here today, I think the fear from the past for the CFOs and being risk averse, now they're seeing that risk is maybe with the cloud provider instead of their own IT department.
Great. Joe, any comments from your perspective?
Sure. My organization is a little bit different. As CFO, VP of Operations, I also have a Director of IT, so we don't have a CIO position, but I think all what John just mentioned and what's been discussed is still applies. And for me, it's a transformational thing. It's for my Director of IT, educating me and making me fully understand his thinking about these new opportunities and ways to build our organization to be more tech-friendly and into the digital world, and then not getting in the way of holding back ideas, holding back suggestions, keeping an open forum for ideas, and that's part of the challenges that I see in the collaboration side of it is constant and regular communication and getting together on the same page so that he and I both see where we need to go, and it's me trying to give him the visibility of the operations and where I see our customers. I do a lot of customer visits, where their needs are, and then him having all that great knowledge about what's available through the cloud and all those other applications that are out there, and how do we then merge the two together to make us a better company, striving to be the best in class and improve our customer service. So that's kind of the challenges that I see.
Great. Well, that sounds like some good collaboration. Marcella, anything else to add from your point of view?
Well, I am a very lucky professional because my CIO is one of the best partners that I could ever dream of. And I think the biggest reason is again, it's based on communication and the two main challenges that I have had and that we have been able to work them through is first the famous return on investment, Chris, that you talked about. And most of the times, the return on investment is not looked at from a cost of opportunity perspective. It's just based on what are real numbers, real revenue, and not truly cost efficiencies that can perspire on an Excel spreadsheet. But I think that the biggest obstacle of all in developing the relationship with the CIO is the underestimation of change management and the impact that changes brings into the organization. When transformational initiatives come into place, and we all know that technology changes bring that for sure, a lot of transformation, people in the organization need to understand the need for change and have the capabilities and the motivation to accelerate change. And most of the frustrations that come across when implementing new systems relate to probably communications issues and how the change is communicated across the organization. When technology arrives, it brings challenges and changes in workflows and operational practices, and most of the time those changes are not addressed properly from a communication perspective. At least this is what I have experienced in my career through the many changes in systems that we have come across.
Gotcha. I think that's wise words for sure in terms of anticipating and planning around those change management components. Makes tons of sense. Let's keep going with another question. This is great dialogue. So maybe shifting gears a little bit, as you think about kind of cloud-based technology and whatever transitions you've made or in progress of making, how has that event in and of itself brought IT and finance together, and maybe some interesting corollaries to that. How are you thinking about scale and future scale of the business as you're looking at IT investments, and also specifically, how is finance working with IT to support the overall organization's growth strategy? So maybe some thoughts there just about how that's playing out within your functions. John, maybe you want to kick us off again real quick?
Sure.
Ideas?
Sure, Chris. So I've got a funny story. When I was at Lifetime Fitness back in, this was probably 2005, our CIO sent myself and our CFO a article from CIO magazine. It was called The ERP Pickle. And it was right after one of the larger ERPs acquired another one, and there was a lot of disruption in the industry. But the article is about this company called Salesforce that was one of the first software as a service providers, and it was kind of looking ahead to where this particular writer from CIO magazine thought things were headed. And come full circle, about a year and a half ago, the same publication had an article about the race to the cloud. And it's funny how in that time period, which it's not that long, but the term cloud wasn't even in existence until about 2008. And now look, this is a question we have on a panel. But ultimately, I think from an investment standpoint, whether you're in the cloud or not, you still have to have your core finance and accounting roots. So the core functionality, debits and credits and AP and AR at a bare minimum. But I think now with the cloud, that core functionality that you're getting from a cloud solution is providing more analytic information. So you have the core, but now you also have information coming out of it that's readily available. And from a CFO standpoint, that correlates directly to improved ROI. So I think that's a trend that's, again, happening quickly. We talk a lot about it. Another related to investments, we used to support a IT team that supported the back office. I hate the back office term. But anyway, post-cloud implementation, that support is now gone, and it's created more of a cloud support team, which actually reported through me as the controller at Lifetime Fitness. So you've gone from a technology-heavy base to a business process type base, and it's really changed how companies can do business, and I think that's another shift that I'm seeing a lot.
Gotcha. I think that makes a ton of sense. Joe, anything to add to that?
Yeah, thanks for the 2008 reference. It's been a long time, but I think what my thinking and what our group sees is cloud is a main part of how we do business. We've got we like to think a hybrid cloud solution that we're using here. But with that, there's so much evolution coming, and data requirements. Salesforce was mentioned, but anything that relates to how best to collect information relative to sales and our sales visits across the board to in-depth information, trying to pull out of our factory situation where we're at relative to capacity levels and those things. All that is extremely important, and I feel, at least in my organization, it's very important that the CFO and the finance organization help drive that and the data analytics. And then it's mentioned about, John mentioned about the group that's now managing that, and I see also a risk part of it because, of course, with cybersecurity and all those other things, we relied heavily on the cloud and key data that we have to protect. So there's that management aspect of it as well, and so I do see risk aversion as a key to all of that. But I feel strongly that we have to drive the information and see how best to work with the IT group so that they can continually come to us with the next evolution of what's available for these solutions, and we do strongly rely heavily on the cloud for that, as well as our own data analytics and programming and review of the data. So yeah, I see that. I see also the definitions of what are the benefits and how to define the intangibles that come from all that is difficult, but still really very important.
Great.
Kind of where I'm at.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe,
like...
by the way, I just Googled who coined the term cloud, and it's August 6, 2006. Then Google CEO Eric Schmidt is credited with that. So there's your trivia for the day.
Perfect.
That's great.
Out of the pickle and into the cloud, right, John? So that's perfect.
That's right. Yep.
Hey, Marcella, get us back on track here. Any other wisdom to share on this interaction or benefits around scale or growth or things like that?
Well, I think that cloud-based systems have accelerated the need for change in organizations. We basically, particularly in my organization, is very spread geographically, and the cloud has helped us big time with allocations of resources. We are not, fully in yet. We are looking at many different options. We currently, our ERP is a pretty standard ERP that, whose technology is a 15-year-old plus, I would say. And we are looking into, changing platforms and develop applications based on these new platforms. And the cloud is getting on the cloud is extremely, extremely important.
Great. so ready to jump in, or almost ready. Let's keep moving. In the interest of time, we'll get to a couple more questions, hopefully, and then maybe just as a reminder, we'll open it up for Q&A for the last 10 minutes or so, Jess. Is that right?
Yep, that's absolutely correct. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, good. So, panel, let's maybe talk a little bit about data. And I think, you know, several of you have mentioned already as being, you know, a key enabler as you think about, you know, how you're digitizing finance or working in different digital kind of ecosystems with your business teams. So, as you think about data, you know, how are you aligning objectives within your function with others to kind of meet the right demands, recognizing the complexity of information and some oversupply and things like that? And then how are you, you know, feeling about IT's ability to deliver that information, which can sometimes be a challenge? And maybe just in the interest of time, you know, pile on a little bit to that. You know, how do you think about the whole cybersecurity component of that as well, just given different technologies and things at play? So, Marcella, let's switch up the order this time. Why don't you kick us off? Share some thoughts.
Sure. Well, our organization is pretty big, and of course, communication has and will always be a challenge. You know, we have more than 60 offices all over the world, and it's not only time and language barriers that you have, you know, but also cultural differences that create challenges to making sure that, you know, priorities, business goals, demands, and objectives are communicated properly. The way that we communicate is still I see a significant number of spreadsheets flying around, you know, and not as much as it used to be. And, you know, ideally we would love to, you know, be all integrated into a worldwide business intelligence system with dashboards that could allow us to get information in real time. We are not there yet. You know, that's what we are seeing in the future. That's what one of the projects we are working on. But certainly it is a challenge with the geographical, you know, spread that we have.
Interesting. So working to kind of get beyond physical boundaries and maybe leveraging cloud as part of that. That sounds exciting. John, what about some perspectives from you?
Sure. Well, ultimately, I think for coordinating and sharing data across the entire organization, it has to be secure, it has to be consistent, and easy to access, and that makes it simpler for the whole organization. We also, when we talk about data, I think too many times we just use data loosely without talking about it being pertinent and meaningful to the audience as well. Where I'm heading with that is a lot of times I think a functional area that maybe finance and the office of the CIO don't push enough is the chief operating officer. And I think if you took reports, information that typically a finance organization might feed the COO for their information and took that out and asked the COO if he or she could have their dream state of data, my guess is it might be a lot different than what the CFO organization has been feeding them, and chances are it would probably be a lot more revenue-facing than they've used historically. So, you know, to get information to the entire organization and to help the entire organization, I think you have to bring in some of those, I would call them non-traditional data users or data setups, and I look at the operational organization as one of the key ones. Even that even rolls down through the COO's organization. You know, at Lifetime, we were deploying iPads for operations personnel in the clubs to use for procurement of chlorine or mechanical items or anything. And you know, here you've got someone who is maybe not an accountant or a finance individual, but they're using technology in a finance realm and through the iPad to do their job. And it's amazing how that information goes from a staff person in operations all the way up through the financial organization. So I like to see cross-functional, not just CFO, CIO, but across the entire organization working together on this.
Great idea, and I think you're right that engaging the COO is a fantastic plan, and it probably stretches you to think differently about sources of information and the types of insights to be gathered. Joe, what else would you add to this one?
So my perspective, again, our business is in consumer electronics, and ceramic capacitors is our main product. We're the actual number two supplier of ceramic capacitors in the world. And why I say that is the volume of products made. We make over 2.4 trillion products a year and deliver those products to a multiple of customers. And a big growth opportunity for us is in North America, is through distribution, which those customers who are distributing to many, many different end customers, they may have hundreds of thousands of end users buying our product, and it may only be so many, but somewhere within there is that needle in the haystack that's going to be the next product that all of us will be using, and so we've got to find that and then latch onto it as it grows, and there's quite a bit of that working with the data and challenges, because we get all the data, but how, as you had mentioned, oversupply of data, how is that best managed? How do you get the IT group as well as the finance group and operations and sales to find the right information to focus on and then spend resources on to track down? We also have, as I said earlier, there's a capacity situation in the market, so we want to know what's going on at our factories down to the nth level so we can understand how to better forecast to our customers, deliveries, and those things. So the database is quite overwhelming if you think of it across the board of all requirements. So I think, and then to boot, talking about security, not only the obvious security issues we have, but also our customers are very they drive security requirements down to the manufacturers such as us because they're worried about competitors finding out what's going on. So we have all sorts of strict requirements with each of our customers in protecting the data. So all that then I think requires a collaboration, not only IT, not only finance, but also operations, marketing, sales, and factory groups. So there is a collaboration required relative to that, and ideas on how to best, again, mine the data is really important, I think, and it's not just going to be the IT and finance people that are doing that, but definitely have a critical role in how to manage that data and how to best present it so that, again, for us, it's where do you apply the resource to what best end opportunity can you think that's going to provide this ROI return and not just be an end with no results. So that's kind of our focus.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think it's great to hear the success you're having with the kind of the product or the segment-based insights. I think that's a great thing to focus on, and it sounds like you all touched on it, but this notion of the security and the data security is really just opens up another collaboration point in some cases with your risk or compliance functions to make sure that you're addressing that, but not using it as a barrier, but certainly staying quite vigilant about that as well as you get more and more information into the ecosystem wherever it lives. Okay, so real quickly, we're going to do one more question and then flip to Q&A, and we'll maybe consider this one a bit of a speed round just in the interest of time. And you've all clearly given examples and demonstrated that you're already quite collaborative between your finance and IT experiences, so that's fantastic. But in the spirit of, kind of looking towards the future as opposed to the past, give us a glimpse or a pearl of wisdom as to how you're thinking about that ongoing collaboration within your organization and, any quick insights you can share for the audience. Let's start with Joe, you this time. Sure.
I was just in Japan, and we had a worldwide meeting with our group, and one of the things that I found very interesting is that in the guise of Internet of Things and using the cloud on a worldwide basis, we've got a project that's identifying operations down to the operator level so that we can, again, collectively see what's going on in the factory in a tight supply situation and then be able to best communicate to our customer what status is, because that's what the customer wants to know. Don't tell me exactly where I am relative to the products you can deliver to me, because it's not just us, it's everyone else in the market. So I think that type of collaboration or looking forward and future steps to get that information out and available is going to make us a more proactive company relative to where the problems are and trying to fix them and get better yield results, but also getting the information out to our customers on a timely and regular basis so that they understand where deliveries are, because, again, they're all concerned and they know it's not just us, but it's all of our competitors as well that are having these delivery issues based on the demand side of the equation in the particular market we're in. So I think that's an example of forward thinking and how best to use the cloud and the information that we have in a better way to get that information to again, the key is to get to the customers so that they understand if they're going to get product from us or not, or they need to go elsewhere, et cetera.
That's great. Customer-centric design rarely fails, so that sounds fantastic. Marcella, what would you say, kind of words of wisdom here on future collaboration?
Well, I think that it's critical for IT, and for the digital organization to be brought to the table at the time that, the discussion around the strategy for the business happens. I think that most of the time CIOs are forgotten and left on the side. And when they are involved, it's a little bit too late to be able to make changes on the plan. I think CIOs need to be included very, very early in the communications. And again, always looking at investments, considering opportunity costs and efficiencies, and particularly those that are rarely expressed on the ROI analysis can create a significant difference.
Great. That's fantastic, and I think it's good to be proactive, as you say. John, last word on this one.
Sure. I think you need to continue to strengthen these relationships, not just between the CFO and the CIO, but the entire organization, like I mentioned earlier, and the respective teams. So what's happening with digital transformation across all functional areas is a huge shift from the old data gathering and assembling and reporting schedule to more data immediately available, so the data analysis coming directly from the source system. I think a lot of the information that you can get out of cross-functional collaborative teams actually creates cross-functional opportunities that can force collaboration. So as an example, you might have some human capital information that can now be applied to finance or accounting data and personnel. And all of a sudden you have a lot more analytical information that can help your ultimate ROI. I like the term accounting happens. So I think we're getting to that point where the touch points are being minimized thanks to the CFO-CIO collaboration. Accounting is going to happen close to automatically, and then we're going to see a big shift to analysis across the entire org.
That's fantastic. Certainly that's where the real value gets unlocked. So, well, thank you all for your time and the good dialogue. Jess, I'm sorry we spilled a couple minutes over here into the QA session, but again, thanks to John and Joe and Marcella for the active dialogue, and I'll turn it back over to you, Jess.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris. Thanks again to the panelists. And Chris, thanks for doing an excellent job moderating. We're now going to review some of the questions that were submitted by the audience during the discussion. Just as a friendly reminder, you can still submit questions to Chris and the panelists. Chris, I think this first question actually is in response to one of your slides that you were displaying earlier, so I'll pose it to you first, but any of the other panelists feel free to jump in as well. It says, regarding AI and blockchain, how many finance organizations in the marketplace are actually applying this appropriately and seeing strong results?
The precise answer is 107. No, it's a thoughtful question, and I think those for finance are probably maybe we'll say lagging areas of adoption. And I know the statistics were on one of the pages. There have been some blockchain examples where I've heard about interactions in some cases with customers in the industry spaces I work with. It's been a little bit less adoptive specifically within finance. I would say AI is a bit higher and probably one of the newest interesting areas as you think about how to leverage artificial intelligence to, I'll say, ask and answer, or at least explore more interesting questions. So combining AI with some interesting sets of data, analogous to where John was talking a little bit in his closing comment there, I think is pretty exciting. And we've probably seen even more adoption there. So I would say keep exploring and finding those opportunities, and staying close is probably the right answer with those.
Excellent.
Any other comments, or do you want to move on to other questions? Jess, up to you, I guess.
No, absolutely. If Joe, Marcella, or John, if you guys have any insights there, please feel free to add in as well.
Maybe I'm just going to add a Q&A here for Chris, but the blockchain is a newer term, and do you think that's more in the CIO's role, or does the CFO have a part in that as well, as far as rolling that out?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think in the spirit of the collaboration, I think it can be both. I mean, if you think about, payment and settlement and some of where blockchain has its roots, I think that absolutely is pertinent for CFOs. So again, it really depends on, where you're thinking about applying it. In many cases, I think the more typical applications are with customer interactions and how those can be made more efficient in meeting evolving customer expectations. But there certainly are examples where it's being applied in the supplier payment context and other supplier validations, even around collecting risk information and things like that. So I think it can be both.
Yeah, thanks.
Excellent. This next question, I believe, also is posing from a slide here, Chris, that you had, but maybe we can have Joe or Marcella weigh in on this one. It says, how is collaboration changing what skill sets you are hiring for?
I'll start with that. This is Joe. I think that's an excellent question. I'm sure it's the case. We're on the West Coast, but I'm sure it's the case throughout the country that finding and retaining key and important talent is always a challenge, especially when you get into these types of highly technical requirements in the job. So it is very important, and I see in the recruiting cycle, finding people that are open and can communicate well and have more of an understanding, not only the IT world when we're talking about an IT hire, but also how business works across the board, and find that individual that's accepting to open his or her eyes about, well, what do we do in total, and how can I best support that? And I see that as a key challenge, key constant challenge, to get the right people on board and then retain them and make them feel important and part of the whole solution.
I agree with you, Joe, that communication and soft skills are a key factor, and probably the most important one in terms of looking for talent, and talent that is willing to cooperate and collaborate. It's all about teamwork, and these days, I mean, anything that is technical can be learned, but soft skills sometimes they can't be learned or taught. So for us, at least for me, that's the most critical factor that I take into account when considering talent.
This is John. Just one thing to add on that one. When we created this cloud support team at Lifetime Fitness, that it's a group of 5, and they weren't coders, so they didn't come from a IT background, but one of the job descriptions was technologically curious. So they like to tinker and that type, but they weren't writing code. So that's a shift from kind of a traditional IT background as well.
Excellent, thank you. This next question says, and John, I think this is in response to your comment about collaborating, with the COO. What other executive functions is finance partnering most closely with? So, John, maybe you can tee us up if there's any other ones you're seeing or seeing clients, collaborating with most closely.
Yeah, right out of the gate, one of the key ones that I see a lot is the CHRO, heading up human resources. I mentioned in my next steps in collaboration that sometimes human capital information can be applied to financial and accounting data, and we're seeing a lot of that. And actually, it kind of relates to that last question, which is, are you hiring differently? And you can start to apply metrics across those different functional areas. I think we're also seeing in the marketing area, bringing in operational analytic information into financial information and merging that. And it gets back to being pertinent information as well. So I would say outside of the ones I mentioned, the CHRO and the Chief Marketing Officer are a couple other functional areas that we're seeing benefits from.
Excellent. Joe or Marcella, did you have anything to add to that question?
I can speak. I think that for us, it's the marketing sales side and helping to be the bridge of information, as I mentioned previously and early in the conversation, relative to all this data that's coming in and what's pertinent and what should be focused on and followed up to is a real key. And so supporting the proper CRM implementations and systems and then ways to collect data from all of our distribution partners, the reams and reams of data that come in relative to their point of sales information is really important in helping the sales organization then best set their funnels and go after what they feel, where we feel we could get the best bang for our buck, so to speak.
Excellent.
Yes, I think it is also particularly in these days. I don't think that there is anything that stands out more than other departments in terms of collaboration. I think, but certainly the digital area is one of the utmost important. So it gets a lot of focus these days. Of course, revenue is always at the top of the list as well.
And I would pile on just real quickly that everybody's organizations are different, and transformation is driven lots of different ways. So whether it's digital or it's a business unit owner or it's the COO or it's whatever, anyone really, find those people and collaborate with them, because that's where the action's going to happen as it relates to the real kind of growth agenda and some of the scalability points we talked about. So it probably varies a lot organization to organization.
Yeah.
Excellent. This question says, any tips on briefing the finance organization on the different digital technologies that exist, such as AI, and how do we best get them introduced to digital opportunities? So, Chris, that sounds like a question that maybe you or John could lead us off on.
Yeah, I'll share a thought. I think, if it's a how to get started question, I think it's maybe just make sure you're asking the right question. So if the question is, how do I get to the cloud, I think that's a good ambition. But I would challenge yourself and your team to find a different question to shoot for, which is, how are we going to get more scale, or how are we going to drive more business insight? And maybe it's a handful of things, but the technology's there. There's lots of options and paths you can be on. I think, again, like we said a couple years ago, it was a little bit maybe more apprehensive, but we're past that point from a industry maturity point of view. And so I would say lean in and make sure you're answering the right question, and then come up with some sort of staged or appropriately paced plan that's going to fit well for you and your organization to press forward. So.
Yeah, that's great, Chris. Another thing I mentioned earlier about CFOs being risk averse, and usually the typical whole finance accounting organization is left, right, debit, credit, balance, very conservative. And when you start talking about digitally enabling the finance department, I think some people get a little nervous because it's getting out of their sweet spot. So I like to ask accounting teams or finance groups, if you could have your dream state and take out your old system, take out your old chart of accounts, if you could start from scratch, how would you build your organization? And if you have a group in your finance team that is into social media and some of the other technologies that maybe aren't directly related to finance, they start to weave that into their responses. And it's kind of a once or twice in a lifetime opportunity really to start over. And I think technology is enabling that, where you can take a conservative accounting group and say, here's your chance, let's get creative. And I know you're not supposed to say creative and accounting in the same sentence, but here's your one chance to make things happen how you think it could happen. So it's getting out of the comfort zone with that finance organization.
Yeah, and I mean, on the finance side, what I can tell you that the best way that at least it has worked with me and my CIO has done really well is explaining everything in a very simple way. Simple is better. I think sometimes CIOs tend to overcomplicate and talk a lot of acronyms and, technologies that the CFOs are not really, it's not their day-to-day operations. So the simpler that you can make it, the better.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. We're almost at the end of our time here, so what we want to do is just say thank you again to all of our panelists, John, Marcella, and Joe, for doing an excellent job sharing some insights. And Chris, thank you for doing an excellent job leading the conversation. We want to thank all of our attendees for joining us today as well. You will receive a link to the brief survey that I mentioned earlier today, and we'd appreciate you sharing your feedback. You'll also receive a follow-up email with the recording within 48 hours. We want to thank you all again for joining us today, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.